Hi there.
Hi, it's me, Reed.
I'm Jennifer.
Welcome.
Welcome. Welcome to another Faith at Home listening practice.
Yes.
We're listening today with Psalm 78, the
Yes.
last verses from the Psalm 54 to 72.
Yes. This has been 4 times. We've split it into 4 pieces, which you can do. You don't have to do a whole psalm. You can do a whole psalm. You may not know this, but Psalm 119 is even longer than this one. So if you want to do the whole thing, that's yeoman work. That's fine.
It only takes about 25 minutes to read through all of Psalm 119,
Maximum.
but as a listening practice,
So we divided this up.
we divide things up
yeah.
sometimes.
So Psalm 78, 54 to 72 is this portion we're doing today. And we're listening. As we read through it, we'll be listening for something that stands out to us.
A word or a phrase or an idea, and we have our little listening book, our big listening book.
In this case.
Something to write with, something to write in, so that we can relax and be calm in the listening process and not have to be all worried about, do we remember all the things that we mean to remember when we come to the end of it? So
That's right. It's also handy you can look back on it and go, I remember reading that, but did I find anything? Did God speak to me? You can go back and remind yourself, oh yeah, God spoke to me. This is what I heard. And that can be very useful.
So would you read for us?
Yes, I'll read. We're reading the NET, the New English Translation of the Bible, Psalm 78, 54 to 72. And as I said, listen for something that God is speaking to you. It could be a word or a phrase or just something that comes to mind to you when you hear it. So, God brought them to the border of the Holy Land, to God's mountainous land that God's right hand acquired. God drove the nations out from before them and assigned them their tribal allotments, and allowed the tribes of Israel to settle down. Yet they challenged and defied God Most High and did not obey God's commands. They were unfaithful and acted as treacherously as their ancestors. They were as unreliable as a malfunctioning bow. They made God angry with their pagan shrines and made God jealous with their idols. God heard and was angry. God completely rejected Israel. God abandoned the sanctuary at Shiloh, the tent where God lived among people. God allowed the symbol of the strong presence to be captured and gave the symbol of God's splendor into the hand of the enemy. God delivered the people over to the sword and was angry with God's chosen nation. Fire consumed their young men, and their virgins remained unmarried. Their priests fell by the sword, but their widows did not weep. But then the Lord awoke from sleep. God was like a warrior in a drunken rage. God drove the enemies back and made them a permanent target for insults. God rejected the tent of Joseph and did not choose the tribe of Ephraim. God chose the tribe of Judah and Mount Zion, which God loves. God made the sanctuary as enduring as the heavens above, as secure as the earth, which God established permanently. God chose David, God's servant, and took him from the sheepfolds. God took him away from following the mother sheep, and made him the shepherd of Jacob, God's people, and of Israel, God's chosen nation. David cared for them with pure motives and led them with skill.
There's a lot of stuff in there. I think for whatever reason, the piece that stands out to me is that the image of the people being as unreliable in their relationship as a malfunctioning bow. Now, a malfunctioning bow is probably not something that we would use, a metaphor we'd use if we were writing this psalm today. But there's something there about maybe the expectations that God had in relationship with the people, and that they weren't following through on sort of what they were expected to do. And Maybe at times they felt like God wasn't following through on God's part either. There have been times where I have felt like that the relationship between God and I wasn't doing what I expected it to, or that the relationship between the other people I cared about, care about, this one I'm married to, sometimes doesn't go the way I expect it to, and that's okay. Like, it doesn't mean that everything's broken and has to collapse. Just to be aware of those times when I feel that way, and for me to bring them into relationship again and again, instead of turning away and hiding, to bring those feelings back into the context of the relationship. What do you notice as you listen?
It was that phrase, God was like a warrior in a drunken rage. It was like, the previous sentence was that the Lord woke from sleep. It was like God was asleep. And then he woke up wild and changed everything. It seems that way sometimes. For me too, it's like God is asleep. Like, hello, hello. And God is not really active, it seems like. And yet, and that it says, it's like God was asleep. And then God became awake and was like a warrior in a drunken rage. So instant action. God is powerful and like a warrior is not easy to be thwarted. You know, God can just come and do what God needs to do. That's what struck me. Is like, wow. It sometimes seems like God is doing nothing, and I'm disappointed and discouraged by that. And then God will suddenly act, and I'll go, oh, there you are. You are around. Oh, thank you. And that struck me because that resonated with me, because I get that feeling. It seems like I'm praying for nothing. And yet God is active, God is present, God is working. I don't perceive it. And that struck me.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. I wonder what you notice as you listen.
Yeah. We'll do it again. You read it this time.
I'll read it this time. And this time you could, if you would, listen for an invitation. Something to do or be or become. Some next step forward for you, for your practical everyday life, and for your relationship with God. God brought the people of God to the border of the Holy Land, to this mountainous land that God's right hand acquired. And God drove the nations out from before the people. God assigned them their tribal allotments and allowed the tribes of Israel to settle down. Yet they challenged and defied God Most High and did not obey God's commands. They were unfaithful and acted as treacherously as their ancestors. They were as unreliable as a malfunctioning bow. They made God angry with their pagan shrines and made God jealous with their idols. God heard and was angry. God completely rejected Israel. God abandoned the sanctuary at Shiloh, the tent where God lived among the people. God allowed the symbol of strong presence to be captured. God gave the symbol of splendor into the hand of the enemy. God delivered the people over to the sword and was angry with the chosen nation. Fire consumed their young men. Their virgins remained unmarried. Their priests fell by the sword, but their widows did not weep. And then the Lord awoke from sleep. God was like a warrior in a drunken rage. God drove the enemies back and made them a permanent target for insults. God rejected the tent of Joseph. God did not choose the tribe of Ephraim. God chose the tribe of Judah and Mount Zion, which God loves. God made the sanctuary as enduring as the heavens above, as secure as the earth which God established permanently. God chose David as God's servant and took David from the sheepfolds. God took David away from following the mother sheep and made David the shepherd of Jacob, God's people, and of Israel, God's chosen nation. David cared for the people of God with pure motives. David led them with skill.
The invitation is this, this last line there, basically. David cared for them with pure motives and led them with skill. And it was like, wow, I'm no David. Like, I'm not, chosen that way or whatever. But then it just still was an invitation. It's like, well, I'm to care for people. I have some responsibilities in this world, for my children, my family, first of all, of course, myself, I suppose, and other people beyond my family, and to do it with pure motives, which is a tall order, frankly, because sometimes I don't even know what my motives are. But that calling, that invitation to care for those around me with pure motives, not for my gain, not because I'm tired and I just want you to go away. So why don't you go do something fun for yourself? Because I don't want you around. Which would be, that's not really a pure motive. I'm talking about me with my children, okay? I do things like that. I not always have pure motives, because I'm more self-absorbed or self-interested. So that was what I'm called to. That's the invitation, is to come and be aware of my own motivation for things, and listen to God for that, to care for those around me and those that are in my care, whoever those are. And sometimes it's people only for a moment, and may not be my family. It may be just somebody I run into. So that's something. That was just what struck me, is the
Thank you.
invitation.
The invitation for me grows out of that same verse, but it's the David led with skill. And so I hear the invitation to lead with skill, and I also hear the invitation that if I am going to lead with skill, I also need to allow myself to be led with skill, so that at first I can be filled up, and then there can be overflow and abundance to lead other people as well. So I wonder what you notice. What do you hear from these words today?
That's right.
It might be something different today than if you were to listen to it tomorrow or last week.
Indeed.
But it's great to pay attention for what the Divine Family says to you today, because they are always speaking to us.
Exactly. You can redo this any number of times. You don't go through the psalm and say, well, I'm done. I've learned everything I can, because there's always more to hear.
There's always more to hear from God. Thanks for being with us today.
Indeed. And we'll see you again.
Talk to you again soon.
Bye-bye.